The shout split the vaulted hush like a lightning strike. She killed my brother. It ricocheted off the stone ribs of St. Bartholomew's Cathedral and stunned the mourners mid-hymn. Heads snapped around. Gasps fanned like birds. The choir fell silent in a ragged gasp, and the pallbearers faltered, a white casket gliding an inch in their frozen hands as if reluctant to be set down. At the back of the nave, a small black girl in an oversized navy coat stood trembling, chin lifted, grief and fury braided tight in her eyes. She killed him, she said again, smaller but unblinking. She did it on purpose. Incense hung sweet and heavy in the cathedral. Up front, near the lilies heaped like snow around the casket of 8-year-old Jamie, stood Serena Vale, elegant, controlled, the picture of mourning in couture black. Her lips curled, not in surprise, but in something colder. At the pulpit, Victor Hale, billionaire architect of apps that moved markets, philanthropist and father by adoption to 2 children now reduced to 1, stared. Tongue-leaden. His gaze snagged on the girl as if the sight of her might save him from drowning. "Nova?" he whispered, recognizing his daughter. Nova stepped forward, pushing past the shivering hedge of guests. She clutched a small stuffed cat whose whiskers were threadbare from love. Captain Whiskers. Uncle Theo had stitched a crooked blue star on its belly the day the Hales brought Nova and Jamie home. Tears rimmed Nova's eyes, but something hotter burned behind them. Serena did it. She planned it. Serena scoffed, pearl drops winking with stained glass light. "Victor, are we truly going to indulge this scene?" Her voice was sanded smooth, the kind that could coax applause from a room that didn't know it was being robbed. Murmurs surged and swirled. Polite horror, ugly curiosity. A few guests angled toward the doors, already drafting tasteful texts about an awful incident they had so bravely witnessed. Others watched, transfixed, because the Hales were what the city watched when it wanted to believe in fairy tales. Victor raised a hand. "Nova," he said slowly, as if speaking through water. "I know you're hurting, but this isn't the time." Nova's chin ticked up. Her small hand burrowed into her coat pocket and produced a folded paper, edges soft from being clenched all night. "You don't believe me," she whispered. "But I have receipts." A twitch clipped Serena's left eyelid, too quick for most, not quick enough for Nova. Nova offered the paper to her father. He took it with a frown. The print was crisp, charmless. An email. He read it once. Again. "Insurance transfers complete. After this weekend at the lake, everything will be settled." Silence swallowed the church so completely the candles seemed to hum. Serena inhaled sharply, then laughed, light as champagne. "Photoshop. Anyone can draft an email." "There's more," Nova said, clutching Captain Whiskers until the seams squeaked. "Uncle Theo hid a recorder in Jamie's cat. In case." She turned the stuffed cat around, unzipped a hidden seam, and revealed a thumb-sized device with a single scarred button. She looked at Victor. "Press play." Victor's fingers were stiff. They found the button anyway. A hiss of static, then Serena's voice, chill and unmistakable. "If you say anything, I'll tell them the accident was your fault." Who do you think they'll believe? A black kid from a group home, or the billionaire's loving wife? The choir's director made a sound like a swallow hitting glass. Truth shattered the nave. Serena's shoulders pinched as if someone had pulled a string in the expensive fabric. She moved like she might launch herself at the cat, but 2 guests, white-knuckled, court-ordered brave, stepped in her path. The organist took his hands off the keys. Someone whispered, "Call the police," and someone else whispered, "Don't make a scene," and the echoes collided. "Illegal," Serena said, pointing at the recorder with manicured precision. "This is illegal." Victor set himself between Serena and Nova. His eyes no longer looked lost, they burned. "You said the brakes failed," he murmured, as if testing whether his tongue still knew how to form the words. "You said it was a terrible accident." Serena's composure cracked, jagged light cutting through. "You have any idea what it cost me to raise someone else's children like they were mine?" She spit, soft enough to pass for grief if you didn't listen. "I deserved." "Get out," Victor said, the words flint. Serena pivoted to bolt, but the aisle birthed obstacles. Guests with blood up in their faces and old money in their bones moved without knowing why, forming a human shoal. Blue lights smeared across the stained glass, sirens drew nearer, or maybe that was just the sound the city made when something big finally snapped. Victor looked down at Nova. She stared back, her throat tight, her small frame stiff under the tide of eyes and incense. "She killed my brother," Nova said, not shouting now, not pleading, just flat. A fact. Victor went to his knees on the stone and pulled his daughter into him. She folded with a small broken sound. Captain Whiskers crushed between them. "Not another second," he whispered, as if prayers could be amended on the floor. "I promise you, we'll get justice for Jamie." The sirens arrived, loud and apologetic. Police escorted Serena Vale from St. Bartholomew's beneath a storm of phone cameras, whispers, and the brittle hush of people terrified their sympathy might be misfiled. The once celebrated social savior in a borrowed halo looked suddenly human, wrath and fear and something like calculation flickering across features the city had only seen arranged as philanthropy. Victor watched Serena vanish beyond the cathedral doors, numbness unkinking into something like direction. He had built empires with less intel. He had weathered boardroom betrayals where the knives were contracts, the blood was stock price. But none of that had trained him for the tremble in Nova's voice or the burned-in sound of Serena's hiss. Inside the cathedral, the sound returned in slivers. People whispered their theories. Some left to be first to brunch gossip. Some stayed because collapse has the gravity of a star. Nova sat at the front pew, Captain Whiskers on her lap, shoulders a tense roof. A deacon approached with a soft gray blanket and a practiced tilt to their compassion. Nova shook her head. Victor crouched beside her. "Are you okay?" Her jaw was a hinge. She did not look at him when she said nobody would believe me. She said you only kept us to look good. Victor flinched like something had thrown a rock through him. "That's not true." Nova turned then, eyes like dark lakes ready to flood. "You changed after you married her. You stopped playing Clue with us. You missed Jamie's birthday. You called us the kids like we were interns." He swallowed hard enough it hurt. "She told me you were acting out, that you needed structure. I wanted to organize the chaos." He heard himself and winced. "I'm sorry." "She made us invisible," Nova said, not cruel, not dramatic, just accurate. Victor inhaled, exhaled. The breath took a year. "Do you know why she took you to the lake?" "She said it was a surprise, just her and us. She bought us ice cream and said, 'See, I can be fun.'" Nova closed her eyes. When she spoke again, the words were soft but laser-cut. The car started swerving. She screamed before it happened. She said the brakes were gone, but her foot pressed harder. Victor's heart went arrhythmic. The coroner's report had said blunt force. The tree at Monroe Lake had been very tall and very patient. The firefighters had called it a miracle that Nova had crawled free. Serena had wept into Victor's shoulder that night, a masterclass in trembling. He had held her and not asked his questions because grief makes cowards of clever men. "How did you get the email?" he asked. "You locked your study printer," Nova said. "But the library printer? She used it for travel stuff so you wouldn't ask. Jamie told me once, so I checked. Serena's smart, but she thinks kids don't know where paper comes from." Victor looked at that damning line again. It was written like brunch. He stood and felt the cathedral constrict. Eyes pressed. The walls leaned in. "Let's go home." "She'll say I faked it," Nova said, rising with the cat held like a shield. "She'll hire people who get paid to say truth is a typo." "I'll hire truth," Victor said, and meant it. The Hale estate stared at its own reflection in a moonless sky. The gray river beyond the terrace moved with a tired reluctance. Inside, the house was gorgeous and cold, designed like a company, lines clean enough to cut you, furniture at attention, art curated for ROI. Victor walked its hallways alone, hearing nothing but the thin whir of climate control and the ghost rattle of laughter he'd postponed. He passed Serena's piano room, which had played Chopin for donors but not lullabies for children. He passed the framed rehearsal photo, Serena and Victor beaming at nothing anyone could spend, and turned it face down. In his study, he poured a drink to hold, not drink, and stared at the safe like a trapdoor. Nova had eaten half a grilled cheese and refused the other half on principle. She had not let go of Captain Whiskers. She was asleep now in the guest room because Serena had redecorated Nova's bedroom in winter to give the space a new story. Victor opened the safe and pulled out a folder labeled in block letters because a younger version of him had liked how authority looked when it was tidy. Insurance portfolio. 3 weeks before the accident, Serena's name appeared on forms she'd called boring but important. The beneficiaries for both children's policies had been changed from Victor's estate to Serena Vale for expediency. It had sounded like responsible parenthood. It smelled now like gasoline. A knock. Nova stood at the study door in pajama pants patterned with tiny rockets, hair a halo of chaos, eyes sharp. "I remembered something," she said. Victor gestured for her to sit. Nova didn't. She stared at the desk recorder Victor had purchased during a season of acquisition wars and paranoia. "In the ambulance," she said slowly. "I wasn't out the whole time. She was on the phone. She said, I had to improvise." "The girl's still breathing." Victor sat down hard. He pulled the recorder from the drawer and set it beside Captain Whiskers. He pressed record. "Everything you remember, Nova. All of it." Nova spoke for 20 minutes like a cliff crumbling into the sea, steady, shocking, inevitable. When she finished, she looked older. "What happens now?" "Now," Victor said, "we find everything she buried." Morning draped itself in fog so thick the house felt like a ship unmoored. Victor stood in the breakfast room with a mug he did not drink from, and the evil email he could not unread. He called John Murch, his lawyer, who answered in a tie. "Reopen the investigation," Victor said, voice flat. "Quietly." Then he called Sloane Cutter, who had once been the kind of FBI agent that wrote memos nobody wanted to read because they were true. Now she ran a boutique investigations firm that specialized in the things powerful people didn't want traced. Sloane arrived exactly 3 hours later in a black blazer wrinkled in strategic places and boots that said "Good luck shoving me." She read, she listened, she pressed her thumb to the audio and the email and the insurance forms like checking a pulse. "This isn't betrayal," Sloane said finally, jaw tight. "This is premeditated." "You believe her?" Victor asked, hating the tremor he heard in himself. Sloane looked at Nova, who was gnawing the inside of her cheek as if it might release courage. "I've heard kids lie to survive. This isn't that." "What do we do?" Victor asked. "We verify everything. Chain of custody on the email. Device forensics. Insurance change requests. Metadata. IPs. We'll get a forensic mechanic to re-examine the car. And the recorder? We preserve it like it's the moon rock." Sloane's gaze cut to Victor. "We do it fast and quiet. She'll panic if she sniffs attention. People make mistakes when they think they're still the main character." That afternoon, Nova took Victor to the garden Serena liked to tour for magazines. At the base of an ivy-eaten gazebo, Nova pried up a loose stone with chipped nail polish and the tenacity of someone who'd been told too many times that secrets belong to adults. She revealed a tin box layered in duct tape. "Jamie and I put stuff here when we were scared," Nova said, voice thin. "He said if something happens to me, open the box. If something happens to him, open it faster." Inside, drawings of space whales and sword-wielding otters, a watch with a cracked face, photos of Serena at the lake house smiling a smile that didn't touch her eyes, printouts of emails Nova must have snuck out little by little, with the patience of a spy in a too-small coat. There was a letter in Jamie's blocky scrawl. "If you're reading this, Serena keeps whispering to a man on the phone. She said a surprise trip, but her eyes look mean. I'm scared, but I hid this just in case. If I don't come back, tell Nova to keep looking up. Stars don't lie." Victor sat on the ground like gravity had suddenly discovered him. Sloane knelt beside him and tapped the letters with a tender finger. "This is gold," she said softly. "Not just for court, for truth." Sloane went to work like a hurricane that knew when to whisper. The insurance change had been pushed through using a stolen digital signature token registered to Victor's former assistant. The email traced to a burner account, but the IP triangulated to Serena's tablet in Victor's house on a Tuesday, when Serena had hosted a spa dinner for women who believed detox was a verb. There were Venmo payments to a consultant named Marco Vell, a security specialist known for making ugly things look tidy. At 9:10 that night, a courier arrived with an envelope thick as bad news. Inside, photos of Serena on a dock handing a flash drive to a tall man with sunglasses at twilight, their heads close. A sticky note in block letters, "You aren't the only one who knows. She has help." Sloane's mouth thinned. "Vell? He used to contract for Lakeview Security until they discovered he was moonlighting for the people his company was supposed to protect you from." Victor's phone buzzed. Nova's text. Someone outside. He ran. Across the street, a black sedan idled under a tired maple. The driver wore a cap. He didn't look at the house. He didn't look away either. The security feed Sloane pulled showed the same sedan had ghosted them twice in 24 hours. Sloane sighed like she'd run this movie before and hadn't liked the ending. We tightened security, hard lockdown, and we set a trap. Morning came, wired and mean. The estate bristled with guards and drones that hummed like nervous bees. Nova shadowed Victor like a second heartbeat. Over eggs she didn't eat, she said. She won't run, not yet. She wants to win. Then we make her try, Sloane said. We leak a relocation. We move Nova into an armored vehicle with escorts. Only we don't. We send a decoy. If Serena's watching, she'll take the shot. Victor hated everything about the plan, except how much he needed it. 2 hours and 11 fake panicked phone calls later, the decoy convoy rolled out. A black SUV with federal escorts. Actors Sloane swore were better than most federal escorts. A girl the same height as Nova in a navy hoodie. A replica Captain Whiskers tucked to her chest. Nova watched from the panic room, a concrete throat in the earth lined with screens, and a bodyguard named Avery, whose biceps could have their own TikTok. On the live feed, a black sedan merged from nowhere like bad weather. She's on it, Sloane murmured in the surveillance van 2 miles away. Wait, Victor said. Let her show us where she thinks she can win. The SUV turned down a narrow road by the forest's edge per relocation orders. The sedan followed. At a bend, the SUV slowed, part of the script Sloane had written in careful ink. The sedan leapt ahead, cutting off the convoy with a surgical slash. A man stepped out, Marco Vell, silencer low, voice sharp. Out, he barked, yanking the back door. The decoy screamed on cue. The woods exhaled agents like a magic trick nobody clapped for. Drop it, Sloane shouted, because some things you say even when they're optional. Vell hesitated, the split second where a life can flip, then ran. 2 shots hissed. Vell went down with a shoulder full of rubber that would bruise like regret. Victor stepped from the van, icy calm. Where is Serena? Vell bared his teeth, red blooming through his jacket. Smarter than you think, he said, like a man who had never actually met a Hale board meeting. Back at the estate, Nova paced the panic room, screens flickering too calmly. Why aren't they saying anything? She asked. Avery checked his earpiece. They got Vell. No sign of... The screens went black. Somewhere in the walls something hissed. Avery's face went soldier still. Behind me. Nova's throat constricted. She held Captain Whiskers so tight the stitches complained. Her lungs burned sweet and stupid. The door cycled with a heavy thunk. A shadow stepped through the gas like a queen through fog. Mask, gloves, black coat that cut the air. You always were the clever one, Serena said, voice funhouse calm. Too clever. Nova backed away until the wall told her she was out of road. They have the email, the forms, the recording, the photos. They have your voice. They have a girl with a flair for theatrics, Serena said. A wife flattened by grief. Which one plays? She lifted a small injection gun, a tidy, efficient horror. No jury sympathizes with a dead little actress. A click sounded in the gut of Captain Whiskers. The red LEDs embedded in the panic room's corners awakened like eyes. A small speaker in the stuffed cat's chest crackled, and Victor's voice filled the room, amplified by the walls Sloane had wired while Victor had paced. Every word, Victor said, cold as a glacier. Every breath. We're live, Serena. Emergency doors scissored shut. 2 agents in masks flooded through the auxiliary hatch like vengeance with OSHA training. Serena spun to run, because even villains believe in exit signs, and was tackled with a precision that suggested someone had enjoyed practice. Victor hit the room seconds later against a crawl of smoke, eyes wild, mouth a handler of prayers. Nova coughed, but she was upright, and when she reached for her father, he folded her into him as if the world could be held in place by arms. Sloane's voice crackled over comms. We got her, Serena shrieked, words like shrapnel, a lawsuit and a smear campaign and a threat stitched together in a dress that no longer fit. You need me, Victor, she said as they cuffed her. You're nothing without. I was less than nothing with you, Victor said, and didn't raise his voice to do it. Rain began, polite at first, then steadier. Outside, the lawn tasted water like something growing. Inside, the smoke thinned, and something else did too. The density that had settled over Victor's chest since the tree, since the siren, since the whisper in the cathedral. It didn't lift. It made room. 3 days after Serena's arrest, the estate felt like a patient who'd survived surgery and was learning the shape of breath again. News vans loitered at the perimeter like gulls. The city loved a story that could be told as both tragedy and lesson. Inside, the house was quieter, not peaceful, but the kind of quiet that felt capable of it. Nova stirred cocoa with her pinky because spoons felt too formal for trauma. Victor nursed coffee number 3 and the deep moral hangover of a man who'd finally looked at the part of the mirror he'd avoided. "How are you holding up?" he asked, and Nova frowned at the question like a riddle that never solved right. "It feels like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop," she said. "That feeling," Victor said, "was my major in business school." Sloane entered with a folder thick enough to fend off a small bear. "Marco Vell is talking," she said without preamble, because Sloane did everything without preamble. He kept a journal, time-stamped meetings, payments. He says Serena pitched it as a retirement plan 4 weeks after the adoption was finalized. Accident optics plus payout plus offshore exit. The woman made a binder. "She never wanted us," Nova said, gaze steady and full of ash. "She wanted you as a story," Sloane said evenly. "She thought the city would clap when she held up your picture." Victor stared at a page that read like an autopsy for trust. One line snagged like a hook. Vell had written, "She says he only adopted them for PR. He won't notice if one is gone." She was wrong, Nova whispered, not for Sloane, not for Victor, but maybe for herself a year ago, sitting under a table listening to the grown-ups decide whether she was a brand. "I want to testify," Nova said suddenly, surprising herself with the steadiness of it. Victor turned. Nova, that's..." "I need her to hear me," Nova said. "I need me to hear me." Sloane nodded once, respectful. "We'll do this on our terms." The city woke up every day this way for a while, a storm of headlines, a tide of letters. Parents wrote apologies to children they had not believed. Strangers sent star stickers and drawings and a quilt that arrived with a note stitched into the hem. "You are believed here." Nova read the letters out loud until her voice roughened, and then kept reading, because even good things can hurt when your body hasn't learned where to store them yet. They built a small altar of paper and thread in the library. Jamie's drawings of rockets and three-eyed dogs. Nova's clumsy comic where Captain Whiskers solved crimes. The photo of Jamie in his goofy hat with the lake behind him like a postcard from the before. Victor added the adoption papers, because his lawyer brain only understood love if a signature held it with both hands. At night, Nova slept with Captain Whiskers, and woke to the cat's recorded hiss, and had to remind herself it was a tool now, not a curse. Victor made grilled cheeses correctly this time, too much butter, the bread a savage gold, and stood in doorways staring at doorways because that was where ghosts congregate. The preliminary hearing was colder than courthouse air has any right to be. The gallery was a cross-section of America, a national news crew trying to look local, legal assistants that could recite the charges by heart if anyone had asked, people from the estate staff who could not imagine not standing where the family stood, a smattering of the city's influencers who did not know whether this would be bad for their brand. The judge, Meredith Price, late 60s, hair like a crown of snow, reputation like a whetstone, asked for order. Serena sat with her legal team, all navy blazers and wounded gazes. She wore pearls again, as if stringing them could connect her to the person she needed to play, and a face so curated it squeaked. Victor testified first. He did not spin. He did not soften. He let the defense call him inattentive and agreed where truth demanded it. "I trusted the wrong person," he said, as if he were finally writing the memo to himself he should have written a year ago. "My children paid for it." When Nova took the stand, the room tilted toward her like a flower to light. She told the story of the trip in a voice that wove and cut and stopped dead in the places where breath goes missing. She held Captain Whiskers not like a talisman, but like a witness. When the audio played, people winced at the sound of Serena's voice, because venom always sounds worse outside a carpeted room. Serena's lawyer tried to make Nova's story about attention and trauma and the malleability of memory. Nova let him stack his questions like a Jenga tower and then tugged the right one. "I didn't want attention," she said. "I wanted my brother to turn 8. The judge called a recess, but the room did not exhale. People stood not because they were supposed to, but because staying seated felt disrespectful to a child who had agreed to be seen. Back at the estate, Nova sat under the oak where they had tucked Jamie's ashes into the soil like planting a star. She placed a tiny plastic spaceship on the marker. Jamie had insisted spaceships belonged everywhere, and whispered so the wind could carry it. I told them. Victor stood with his hands in his pockets, because fathers don't know what to do with their hands when their daughters are brave. He'd be proud, he said, and meant it in his bones, where truth lives when it finally moves in. That night, Sloane brought another folder, because Sloane was Santa if Santa specialized in consequences. The DA wanted to move. Serena's bail was denied after Vel admitted, with the weary flourish of a man who'd used up his lies, that Serena had asked him to tilt the odds in favor of the car not carrying both children home. "You'll get pressure," Sloane warned Victor. "Money finds phone numbers, sympathy calls collect, but the evidence is gravity. It doesn't care who you are." Nova found Victor in the library later, staring at an old photo he hadn't seen in years. Himself at 27, hair reckless, eyes cocky, holding a prototype phone that looked now like a toy. He looked at the boy in the photo through the smoke of the last year and could not remember wanting anything as badly as he wanted to be worthy of the daughter in the other room. "Dad?" Nova said, the word clumsy in her mouth, bright in the air. Victor swallowed his heart and turned. "Yeah?" "Can I keep calling you that?" she asked. "You never had to ask." The trial would come, big as a moon, but life did not wait. It built around it in small, defiant stitches. Nova started sketching logos at the kitchen island, a star with a voice line through it, a megaphone with a teddy ear, for something she wanted to call Jamie's Echo. "It's for kids like us," she said, "for anyone who needs someone to believe them first." "I'll fund it," Victor said instantly, because money could not fix everything, but it could build doors where walls pretended to be destiny. "I want it to be for real," Nova said, "not just a rich guy apology tour." "Then we put the right people in charge," Victor said. "We listen, we don't center ourselves, we make the thing that wasn't there when you needed it." They wrote the mission statement together at the kitchen table, cocoa rings blooming on the drafts like small, dark moons. Nova insisted the first line be simple: "We believe kids." Victor added a last line in a hand that shook. "Founded by Nova Hale, survivor and truth-teller." Nova rolled her eyes without heat. "Cringe," she said, which for teens is love. The trial opened under a gray sky that made the courthouse look like it had been painted in reasonable doubt. Reporters flocked like migratory birds that had learned the court schedule. Inside, Serena's team tried to turn a woman into an archetype. The prosecution, perhaps miraculously, decided to trust facts. They walked the jury through the fraud like a map of a bad neighborhood. The email. The insurance forms with the wrong name in the right place. Vel's testimony, sopped with self-interest, but braced by evidence that didn't care whether he cried. The mechanical analysis of the car's system. A subtle disable, a staged failure, a bad hand dealt by someone who believed they were the dealer. The defense called Serena to the stand and dressed her in fragility. She performed it well. She spoke about pressure and image and the loneliness of being married to a man the city mistook for a lighthouse. She asked the jury whether any of them had ever been trapped by a role they didn't ask for. 2 people glanced at the floor. One juror wrote something that might have been a grocery list. Nova testified again. She did not bring Captain Whiskers this time. She brought a copy of Jamie's letter and read one line aloud. "Stars don't lie." The courtroom heard it as if the boy himself had spoken from the oak. When the defense suggested she was rehearsed, she said, "I practiced not crying. That's different." The jury deliberated for 23 hours that felt longer than the year behind them. The verdict landed heavy and clean. Guilty. Guilty. Serena did not flinch. She had always been the best statue in the room. But something in her eyes, not regret, not recognition, flickered out like a candle offered no oxygen. Outside, microphones sprouted like weeds. Nova stepped to one because sometimes you choose to stand where the noise is loudest. Today wasn't revenge, she said. It was truth. She stepped away before anyone could ask her how it felt. Not everything has to be content. Back home, the house exhaled. The air changed temperature. The oak nodded in a wind only it felt. Victor and Nova walked to the small plaque by the roots. Nova set Captain Whiskers on the stone, then picked him back up immediately because some loyalties you don't outsource to weather. "I want to do more," she said. "Not just for Jamie, for all the kids whose whispers don't make it to microphones." "Then we build," Victor said, "and we let them lead." They did. The first chapter of Jamie's Echo opened in a renovated community center with bad fluorescent lighting they would fix, and a mural they hadn't painted yet that would someday stop children in their tracks because they would see themselves in it. The program wasn't glossy. It was a circle of chairs and a rule written in fat marker. Listen first. Kids came. They whispered the edges of things. They drew when words got stuck. They performed small skits where the villains were sometimes teachers and sometimes monsters, and sometimes the version of themselves that didn't tell. They wrote letters to each other with star stickers and emojis because healing is not allergic to trend. A tabloid called Jamie's Echo a brand exercise. Nova filmed a video on a borrowed phone in a room with bad acoustics and said, "We're not a brand. We're a bridge." It didn't go viral. It just went. Which is better. Clarissa, Serena, the woman behind all the names, appealed because of course she did. The appeal was denied because sometimes the system remembers what it's for. Sentencing landed at 6 years with no early parole for the core charges, more for the rest. It wasn't enough in the way nothing is ever enough when you're measuring against a boy who should have turned 9. It was exact in the way a door is exact when it closes. Nova spoke at a school in Cincinnati about telling the truth when you can't find the words for it yet. She watched a boy gather courage like lint and raise his hand. She watched a girl slip her a note, "My counselor listens now." "Thank you." She went home and slept for 14 hours and woke up hungry for the first time in months. The foundation grew, not like wildfire devours, but like ivy, slow and stubborn, cracking the mortar of old buildings and teaching them new shapes. Chapters in Phoenix, Denver, Seattle, Detroit. Listening circles in churches and libraries, training for teachers on how to respond when a small voice says something enormous. A pen pal network of star letters connecting kids across cities who could tell each other, "I believe you," without ever having to explain why that sentence feels like a life raft. At a national symposium in D.C., Nova stood in a room where policy wore suits and said, "Start with listening, then fund what listening tells you to do." A congresswoman asked whether Jamie's Echo would consult on legislation, and Nova said yes, even though the word felt too big for her mouth, because sometimes you grow into the yes you give. On the first anniversary of Jamie's death, they gathered at Monroe Lake, not because the place had earned it, but because reclaiming is a kind of justice too. They lit paper lanterns and let them go. They didn't watch them drift away like wishes. They watched them hover like promises. Later, under the oak, Victor said, "We're doing the right thing." Nova leaned into him, Captain Whiskers tucked between them like an old soldier finally off duty. "Because he believed I would," she said. The stars above the estate looked like punctuation in a story that wanted to be told forever. They didn't look like answers. They looked like directions. And they kept going. Autumn folded itself into the city like an old scarf, familiar, frayed at the edges, still warm. By then, Jamie's Echo had grown beyond anything Victor could have sketched on a whiteboard. What had begun in whispers now had chapters humming in 6 cities, and each chapter had its own accent, its own pulse. Nova was 13 now, taller by an inch, but her eyes carried more years than her bones. She was the youngest board founder in the state, though she hated the word board. "It makes us sound like furniture," she quipped once at a donor dinner, earning a ripple of laughter. But her delivery was flat, deliberate, a teenager's way of throwing shade and truth at the same time. TikTok loved it. Clips of Nova speaking racked up views under hashtags like Truth Matters and Kids Aren't Props. Victor kept a cautious hand on the wheel. He funded without meddling, advised without eclipsing. The truth was, he didn't trust himself to lead anymore. Nova's instincts had saved them once. He wasn't about to doubt them now. The Phoenix chapter had invited Nova to keynote their first Star Letters Summit. The venue was a reclaimed movie theater, the smell of popcorn forever stitched into the walls. On the stage, a mural painted by kids sprawled across the backdrop. Constellations made of handprints, each star labeled with a word: heard, brave, seen, loud. Nova stepped up in her sneakers, hair pulled into a puffball bun, Captain Whiskers tucked in her backpack. "Sometimes bravery doesn't sound like a roar," she said into the mic. "Sometimes it sounds like a whisper that refuses to die." The crowd, kids, teachers, parents, leaned forward. She cracked a grin suddenly. "Sometimes bravery also sounds like me asking for churros after this speech. Don't judge." Laughter broke the tension. The kids clapped harder than the adults, and Nova winked. "See? Bravery is also carbs." That clip alone made the rounds on Instagram with the caption, "Bravery is carbs." After Phoenix, not everything was applause. Serena's defense team filed motion after motion, trying to gum up the courts with appeals. Tabloids published think pieces with headlines like "The Wife, the Whisper, and the Whale." Is Nova Hale too perfect? A podcaster suggested that the recording in Captain Whiskers had been deep-faked, though he admitted in the same breath that he didn't know how deepfakes worked. Victor wanted to sue every last one. Nova stopped him. "If we keep fighting shadows," she said, "we'll never walk into the light." Still, the shadows knew where to aim. One evening, as Victor and Nova returned from a community forum in Detroit, they found a note slipped under the estate gate. Block letters, black ink. "You don't get to win twice." Sloane Cutter was at the estate within an hour, scanning the grounds with her team. She treated the note like radioactive waste. "Could be a fanboy. Could be someone angling to look scarier than they are," she said. "Or it could be Serena's allies, reminding you she still exists." Nova read the note twice, then tossed it into the fire pit. She doesn't get to write our story anymore. Even in the heaviness, Nova found ways to slice in humor. During a Cincinnati workshop, a boy confessed he'd been too scared to tell his dad about being bullied. "What if he says it's no big deal?" the boy whispered. Nova crouched to meet his eyes. "Then you tell him, 'Okay, Dad, but next time I'll call Mom and let her go viral dragging you on Facebook.'" The boy burst out laughing, tension breaking like a dam. "I'm serious," Nova said. "Sometimes we borrow courage from jokes." That story traveled, quoted in PTA meetings, tweeted by celebrities. A meme spread. Borrow courage. Return it with interest. By winter, Jamie's Echo was being asked to consult in places Victor had never imagined. Juvenile detention centers, rural schools, even a congressional subcommittee. Victor worried about overreach, but Nova only grinned. "Dad, stars don't ask permission to shine in new places." He stared at her, recognizing Jamie's phrasing echoed in her voice. Stars don't lie. The letter from UNESCO had been real. Nova and Victor were invited to Geneva the following summer for a global youth advocacy summit. For Nova, the idea of boarding a plane across the ocean was both thrilling and terrifying. She joked about packing Captain Whiskers in first class. "If he doesn't get the aisle seat, I'm not going." Victor laughed harder than he had in months. The story carried them forward, toward Geneva, toward bigger stages, toward deeper risks. But the route remained the same. A boy's whisper saved in a stuffed toy, a girl who refused to be quiet, and a father learning, slowly, that listening is an act of love, sharper than empire. The jet roared over the Atlantic, a silver dart against the endless blue. For Nova, it was the farthest she had ever been from the oak tree where Jamie rested, and yet she felt him closer than ever. Captain Whiskers sat buckled into the seat beside her, a photo op Victor had tried to prevent until Nova quipped, "What, you want PETA canceling us for stuffed animal neglect?" The flight attendants laughed. Victor gave up. Geneva shimmered like glass when they landed. The air tasted of lake water and money. Flags flapped along the avenue outside the Palais des Nations, each banner a patch in the world's quilt. Nova pressed her forehead to the shuttle window. "Feels like Hogwarts, but for politicians," she whispered. Sloane had insisted on accompanying them with a skeleton team. She scanned the crowd with the ease of someone who could spot a lie by its shoes. "Eyes up, this many egos in one place. Somebody's bound to want the mic more than the truth." Victor squeezed Nova's shoulder. "You don't owe them magic. Just honesty." Nova smirked. "Honesty is magic, Dad. You just don't get a wand with it." The hall was enormous, marble columns climbing into ceilings painted like dawn. Delegates, activists, and press filled the seats. The schedule promised sessions on climate, refugee aid, digital privacy. Then, nestled in the lineup, youth advocacy, voices that change law. When Nova stepped up, the lights didn't blind her. They steadied her. She opened not with Jamie's story, but with a different one. Last month in Detroit, a girl named Marisol asked me, how do I know if the world will listen? I told her, start by speaking. Then we'll build the world that listens. The translator's headsets hummed. Heads nodded. She spoke of whispers becoming movements, of Jamie's echo turning from a living room dream into a network. She spoke of laughter as a survival tool. Sometimes courage is a whisper, she said. Sometimes it's a meme. Don't laugh. Memes move faster than laws. A ripple of laughter proved her right. She closed with Jamie's words, stars don't lie. Then she added her own, but silence does. The applause rose, not thunderous but tidal, rolling, steady, pulling more into it as it spread. During a break, as Nova posed with youth delegates from Nairobi and Seoul, Victor felt a prickle along his spine. Across the lobby, at the edge of the glass wall, a figure lingered. Tall, coat collar raised, face half-shadowed. For a split second, Victor swore it was Serena. His heart thudded. Impossible. She was serving 6 years in a U.S. federal facility. But trauma doesn't obey geography. Sloane saw his face and followed his line of sight. She shook her head. Not her. Just a ghost wearing the wrong coat. Breathe. Still, the image hung over him. At night in the hotel, he confessed it to Nova. She didn't flinch. She'll haunt us for a while, Nova said. But haunting isn't the same as holding. We've got the keys now. The next day, a delegate from Finland nervously asked Nova for advice. His English was stiff, his palms sweaty. How do children trust again? After betrayed, Nova tilted her head, then deadpanned. Bribery. Works every time. Candy, Wi-Fi, or both. The whole table laughed, the Finn included, his relief obvious. Then Nova added softly, and by showing up, again and again, until trust grows back like scar tissue, stronger than before. By the end of the summit, Jamie's Echo was no longer just an American initiative. Youth leaders from Brazil, India, and Kenya signed letters of partnership. A French NGO offered to fund translations of the star letters exchange into 10 languages. Victor watched the momentum snowball with awe and fear. He had seen growth destroy companies when their roots weren't deep enough. One evening, overlooking Lake Geneva, he voiced it to Nova. What if we're moving too fast? Nova skipped a stone. It leapt 4 times before sinking. Dad, trauma doesn't wait politely. Neither should healing. When they returned, the estate no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like headquarters. Staff from chapters rotated in and out. Rosa from Denver, Emily from Seattle, Marisol from Detroit. The hallways buzzed with languages, laughter, even arguments about how best to set up listening circles. Nova thrived in the chaos. One afternoon, she painted a mural on the library wall, stars branching into roots. When Victor raised an eyebrow at the dripping paint, she grinned. It's washable, like trauma. Messy now, but it fades. And then came the letter. Slipped under the estate's door one evening in an envelope with no postmark. Inside, a single sentence. You built this on ashes. Ashes still burn. Sloane tightened security, doubled patrols, traced the paper's watermark. But she also warned Victor and Nova, someone wants you rattled. Don't hand them the victory. Nova held the letter over the fireplace until it curled into smoke. Ashes also fertilize, she said. They forgot that part. Victor stared at her, realizing again that Jamie's Echo had never been about him. It was about her voice, Jamie's memory, and every whisper turning into a constellation. The winter sun fell pale across the Hale estate, scattering light that never quite warmed. Outside, security cameras tracked every corner, drones buzzed like lazy hornets above the grounds. But inside, Jamie's Echo was humming louder than ever. New chapters were blooming, letters arriving daily, invitations piling on Victor's desk like autumn leaves no one raked. And then the fracture came. At the Detroit chapter, a volunteer discovered a crumpled envelope wedged under the office door. Inside was a printout of an article, tabloid fodder, arguing that Nova's testimony at trial had been scripted by opportunistic handlers. Scrawled across the page in red marker, ask yourself if you were used to. When Rosa Martinez called Victor, her voice shook. We found 3 copies, planted in kids' mailboxes. Whoever's behind this knows our system. Victor clenched the phone. We'll handle it. Nova overheard. She didn't flinch. Let them talk. Whispers only matter if we stop shouting. But that night she lay awake. Captain Whiskers pressed against her chest, wondering if any of the kids believed the red scrawl. Days later, the website for Jamie's Echo flickered. For 20 minutes, its homepage didn't show murals or mission statements. It showed Serena's mugshot, pixelated with the words, "Do you believe a liar's child?" The IT team scrubbed it fast, but screenshots were everywhere. Hashtags bloomed, echo or lie, truth or PR. Sloane slammed her laptop shut with enough force to rattle Victor's whiskey glass. It's coordinated. Serena might be locked away, but her allies? They're trying to salt the earth you planted. Victor rubbed his temples. How deep can this go? Sloane's eyes sharpened. Deep enough to make you question your own people. At the next board meeting, tension hummed. A few local directors, tired, overworked, wary of the smear, hesitated. One said, "We can't keep putting a child in the spotlight. Nova's story draws support, but it also paints a target. Maybe the foundation needs a different face." The words stung. Nova didn't speak, just stared at the table, tracing circles into the wood with her fingernail. Victor bristled. "She is the face. She built this. Without her voice, none of you would even be here." But he saw doubt flicker across more faces than he wanted to admit. Later, Rosa found Nova sulking in the library, scrolling through memes. One showed Captain Whiskers photoshopped into Among Us with the caption, "Serena was the imposter." Another had Nova in sunglasses under bold text, "Trust issues? Same, girl." Nova laughed despite herself. "At least the internet's still chaotic neutral." Rosa sat beside her. "Let them doubt. Doubt's loud at first, but it burns out. Truth doesn't." Instead of hiding, Nova leaned in. She launched a TikTok series from the Cincinnati Media Lab, Truth Time with Nova. Each clip was under a minute. One showed her holding Captain Whiskers. "Meet the bear who caught a killer. Yes, he's single." Another, "People ask if my testimony was scripted. Yeah, by trauma. Not exactly the collab I wanted." The most viral clip, Nova deadpanning. "If believing kids makes you uncomfortable, maybe you're the problem." Oops, did I say that out loud? The series blew up. Kids duetted her videos with their own truths. Teachers stitched them with classroom discussions. Donations spiked again. Then Sloane called a midnight meeting. On the table, a dossier. Photos of a man in dark glasses, grainy surveillance of meetings at dive bars. Name's Felix Navarro, she said. Vel's old associate. Insurance fraud, sabotage, blackmail. Word is he's the one seeding these campaigns. Serena's too isolated to orchestrate from prison, but Navarro, he's free, and he's angry. Victor exhaled like a man swallowing fire. "So he's trying to finish what Serena started." Nova gripped Captain Whiskers tight. "Then we finish him first, with truth." Sloane's plan was simple and dangerous. Leak fake intel that Nova would be speaking alone at a pop-up event in Charlotte. If Navarro took the bait, sending plants, spreading disinfo, they'd catch him in the act. Victor hated it. "You're asking me to dangle my daughter as bait." Nova met his eyes. "Dad, I already was bait. Serena used us. I'm just flipping the script." Victor wanted to argue, but Jamie's voice echoed in his memory. Stars don't lie. He nodded. The pop-up event was staged in a repurposed church basement. Folding chairs, bad lighting, donuts from a corner shop. Nova stood at the front, casual, hoodie pulled low, Captain Whiskers on the table. Halfway through, a man slipped in. Sunglasses indoors. A phone angled at her face. Navarro. Sloane's team was already moving. One agent tripped near him, knocking the phone loose. Another blocked the exit. Within minutes, Navarro was cuffed, his laptop seized. On it, evidence of payments, smear campaigns, contracts linking back to Serena's lawyer's firm. Sloane smirked. "Congratulations, Nova. You just turned bait into proof." Nova grinned. Someone clipped that for TikTok. The smear campaign collapsed overnight. Screenshots of Navarro's files went viral, drowning out the doubt. Hashtags flipped. Echo exposed trended, but this time with kids sharing their truths, using Nova's memes as armor. The fracture in the board healed fast. Those who doubted apologized. Nova accepted, but only after making them wear stickers that read, "Officially a believer." Victor laughed harder than he had in months. God, Jamie would have loved that. Nova looked at the oak tree outside, where stars glimmered faintly. He does. Every meme, every whisper, every voice. He's still here. Spring unfurled across the Hale estate, wildflowers spilling over the stone path like confetti. A year had passed since Serena's arrest, and Jamie's echo was no longer a whisper but a chorus. Letters poured in from South Africa, Japan, Chile. A group of teens in Nairobi painted a mural of stars with the words, "Truth travels farther than silence." Nova stood before the map in the Foundation's HQ, pins stabbing into cities like constellations, and chewed her lip. "Dad, it's getting bigger than me." Victor studied her. She was taller now, hair longer, shoulders straighter. But the stuffed cat was still never far. "It was never just you," he said. "You lit it. They're carrying it." Nova smiled faintly. "Still feels like I'm piloting a rocket. I don't know how to land." The Geneva summit had cracked open a door. Now, a French NGO wanted Jamie's Echo to open a chapter in Marseille. They offered a converted warehouse, volunteers fluent in 5 languages, and a muralist already sketching designs. Nova was nervous. "What if it doesn't translate?" Victor chuckled. "Nova, pain translates. So does hope." When they arrived, Marseille felt alive. Graffiti bright, sea wind sharp. At the launch, a Syrian refugee named Layla told her story of being ignored when she tried to report abuse in a shelter. She ended by pointing at Nova. Her voice gave me mine. Nova's eyes filled, but she cracked a grin. "Don't make me ugly cry in French. It'll trend." The room laughed, and Layla laughed too. Back in the States, Nova's school counselor pulled Victor aside. "She's missed nearly half the semester. She's brilliant, but she's balancing adulthood on a kid's frame." That night, Victor sat on Nova's bed while she doodled constellations across her journal. "Do you want to keep doing this?" he asked gently. "You don't owe the world your childhood." Nova didn't look up. "Dad, my childhood burned with Jamie. This is what I owe him." Victor's chest ached. He wanted to fight her, to ground her, to wrap her in bubble wrap. But he saw Jamie in her stubborn tilt and knew some fires couldn't be smothered. To balance the heaviness, Nova recorded another TikTok, her reenacting Serena's infamous hiss with Captain Whiskers as the villain. She lip-synced the line, "Who do you think they'll believe?" and then cut to Whiskers wearing sunglasses and mouthing, "Not you, sis." The internet exploded. Even Sloane cracked a smile. "You're turning trauma into memes. That's disturbingly effective." "Coping mechanism," Nova shrugged. "Gen Z superpower." News broke. Serena was appealing again, this time on grounds of mental distress. Her legal team claimed her environment in prison was unsafe and that her trial had been tainted by media frenzy. Nova scoffed when she saw the headline. "She's playing victim now. Classic." But Victor frowned. "Courts have bent to weaker arguments." Sloane laid a folder on the table. "Then we get ahead. We show the world she's not just a villain in your story. She's a pattern. Every fraud, every lie, every cover-up Navarro helped stitch together. We release it before her lawyers can spin it." Nova hesitated. "Won't that keep me tied to her forever?" Sloane leaned forward. "No, it'll cut the cord." A filmmaker who had been quietly documenting Jamie's Echo approached them. She proposed a documentary, Whispers That Roared, to air before Serena's hearing. Victor worried it was exploitation. Nova surprised him. "If the world's going to talk about me anyway, let me tell it myself." The film blended Jamie's letters, the Captain Whiskers recording, Nova's testimony, and footage from chapters worldwide. It ended not on Serena's face, but on Nova in Marseille saying, "This isn't about me. It's about all of us who whisper until someone listens." The documentary went viral before it even premiered. Clips shared with captions like "Believe Kids." Always. On the day of Serena's appeal, protesters gathered outside the courthouse with lanterns shaped like stars. When Serena's lawyers claimed unfair trial, the DA played the documentary clip of Serena's hiss. The judge's ruling was swift. Appeal denied. Sentence upheld. Serena's face twisted as cameras clicked, no longer the elegant mask, just a hollow glare. Nova watched from a live stream back at the estate, Captain Whiskers on her lap. She exhaled. That's the last time she takes center stage. Victor kissed the top of her head. Amen. Months passed. Jamie's Echo launched chapters in Nairobi, São Paulo, and Seoul. Each developed its own style: story circles, murals, theater plays, digital storytelling labs. Nova attended openings when she could, sometimes in person, sometimes virtually. In Nairobi, kids gifted her a necklace of carved stars. In São Paulo, teens painted a mural of her and Jamie as constellations. In Seoul, students taught her a K-pop dance and recorded it for TikTok. She tripped halfway through, laughed. And the video went viral anyway. But growth strained the foundation. Some board members argued for corporate partnerships to fund expansion. Others worried selling out would dilute their mission. One night, the debate erupted into shouting in the estate's library. Nova raised her voice over them all. "We don't exist to make corporations look good. We exist so no kid ever feels invisible again." If a partnership helps that, fine. If it doesn't, bye. Silence fell. The board nodded. Nova had chosen the line. On the second anniversary of Jamie's passing, Nova stood again under the oak. Lanterns glowed, letters tucked into a chest. Children from around the world sent videos that played on a projector across the lawn. We are brave. We are heard. We are not alone. Victor slipped an arm around her shoulders. You've turned grief into a galaxy. Nova whispered back, eyes on the stars. No, Dad, Jamie did. I just kept looking up. The United Nations chamber was colder than Nova expected. The marble gleamed, the rows of country placards stretched like an atlas she'd once memorized in a classroom before everything broke. Delegates shuffled papers, translators adjusted headsets, cameras swiveled. At the front, a blue flag hung heavy behind the podium. Nova sat between Victor and Sloane, Captain Whiskers on her lap in a discreet tote bag. This is it, Sloane murmured. The big leagues. Nova smirked. Feels like Model UN but with higher stakes and worse snacks. Victor chuckled despite his nerves. Just remember, you don't have to sound like them. Sound like you. When her name was called, Nova Hale, founder of Jamie's Echo, the chamber quieted. The cameras zoomed. Nova stepped up, small against the podium, but her voice didn't waver. I was 9 years old when I stood at my brother's funeral and told the truth no one wanted to hear. People called me dramatic, attention-seeking, a liar. If not for one stuffed cat with a recorder inside, I wouldn't be here. My brother wouldn't have justice. But this isn't about my story. It's about every child whose whisper gets dismissed, every kid who's told no one will believe you. In my country, we built Jamie's Echo to change that. And now, in Nairobi, in Marseille, in São Paulo, and Seoul, kids are proving that listening isn't a luxury. It's justice. She paused, letting the words settle. Stars don't lie. Silence does. Today, I'm asking you to do something radical. Believe children. Create laws that don't just punish after harm, but protect before it. Fund listening circles. Train teachers. Build safe channels in every school, every shelter, every place kids live their lives. Her eyes swept the chamber, catching the flags, the faces. Because one child's whisper can change the world if someone bothers to listen. The applause was restrained at first, diplomatic, polite. Then it grew, rolling, some delegates even rising to their feet. Nova exhaled, shoulders dropping, and whispered under her breath, We did it, Jamie. Of course, not everyone clapped. The next morning, an op-ed in a major newspaper sneered, Are we letting a 13-year-old set global policy? Others questioned Victor's wealth funding the movement. Some muttered about child exploitation. Victor bristled. I knew this would come. Nova read the article at breakfast, chewing toast with exaggerated slowness. Honestly, kind of iconic. I made the front page without even doing a TikTok dance. Sloane nearly spit out her coffee. You're impossible. Exactly, Nova said. That's why they're mad. Kids aren't supposed to be impossible. Later that week, Nova filmed a short video from the UN Plaza, Captain Whiskers perched on the fountain edge. Some adults say I shouldn't be speaking here. Cool. But maybe if they'd listened to kids in the first place, I wouldn't have to. Anyway, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Captain Whiskers approves. The clip hit 1 million views in 12 hours. Comments poured in. Preach, Nova. Captain Whiskers 2028. Kids are leaders too. During a press Q&A, a reporter asked her directly, Nova, do you ever feel like you've lost your childhood? For once, Nova hesitated. Cameras clicked. Silence stretched. Finally, she said, I lost Jamie. That changed everything. But being a kid isn't about not having responsibility. It's about still laughing at dumb memes. Still eating too much candy. Still hugging my stuffed cat. So yeah, I'm still a kid. Just one who got loud earlier than planned. The room stilled, then erupted in applause. Even the cynical reporters lowered their pens for a beat. When they flew back, the estate didn't feel like an estate anymore. It felt like a headquarters for a movement. Maps lined the walls. Kids' drawings from chapters worldwide covered the stairwell. The oak tree outside was strung with lanterns that volunteers lit nightly. Victor stood with Nova on the terrace, watching the lanterns glow like stars scattered at ground level. You realize, don't you? You're leading something the world's never seen. Nova hugged Captain Whiskers to her chest. No, Dad, we're leading it. And Jamie's still at the center. Victor's eyes shimmered. Then where do we go next? Nova pointed upward at the constellations. Everywhere. The third anniversary of Jamie's death arrived under skies so clear they seemed painted. At the Hale estate, the oak tree had grown thick with lanterns, each representing a story from a child who had found their voice through Jamie's echo. Some lanterns carried notes, some carried drawings, some carried nothing at all. Just light. Nova was 14 now, taller, sharper in her humor, more grounded in her purpose. And yet, on that morning, she sat cross-legged in the grass at the base of the oak with Captain Whiskers tucked into her lap, looking very small. Victor approached quietly, coffee mug steaming in his hands. "Big day," he said. Nova glanced up. "Feels like the last chapter of a book, but also the first page of another." Hundreds gathered at the lake house where it had all begun. Leaders from Nairobi, Marseille, Detroit, and Seoul flew in. Children who once whispered now stood at microphones, telling stories in their own voices. One boy said, "I thought being ignored meant I didn't matter. Now I know my words can change a room." A girl added, "I learned silence was never safety. Speaking is." Nova sat in the front row, listening, tears in her eyes, but also laughter bubbling when one kid cracked a joke about bribing teachers with pizza to listen better. The room roared, and Nova clapped the loudest. Finally, it was her turn. She walked to the front, lantern light shimmering across her face. "I used to think truth was heavy," she began, "like it would crush me. But I've learned truth is a bridge. It carries us, connects us, holds us up when silence tries to drown us." She lifted Captain Whiskers high. The crowd chuckled, some wiping tears. "This silly cat saved me, but it wasn't really the recorder inside him. It was my brother Jamie, believing I could carry our truth until the world believed too." Today, Jamie's echo isn't just mine anymore. It's yours. Every lantern, every letter, every voice. This is our constellation, and it will never go dark. The hall erupted, not just applause, but stomping feet, clapping hands, children shouting, "We are heard!" Later, after the crowds thinned and the lanterns floated across the lake, Nova slipped back into the empty church that had first held her cry. "She killed my brother." The pews were dusty now, the choir loft abandoned. Yet when she stood at the front and whispered Jamie's name, the silence didn't crush her. It carried her. She closed her eyes. For a moment she swore she heard his laugh, faint as wind through leaves. Victor found her there. He didn't speak, just sat beside her. After a while, Nova whispered, "I think he knows. I think he's proud." Victor's hand trembled as it found hers. "He is, and so am I." In the years that followed, Jamie's echo spread to 50 cities, then 100. It became less about one girl's testimony and more about thousands of voices weaving a safety net the world had never built before. Universities studied it. Lawmakers cited it. Children carried it forward. And Nova? She grew, but she never let go of Captain Whiskers. At 17, she laughed during a live interview when asked why she still carried a stuffed toy. "Because he reminds me that sometimes the smallest things hold the biggest truths." The audience rose to their feet. That night, under the oak tree, Nova whispered again to the stars, "We did it, Jamie. Your echo became a chorus." And for the first time, she didn't just feel like she was carrying him. She felt like he was carrying her, too. Follow my channel to discover more interesting stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next interesting content. Thank you for listening.